Hey everybody, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that I've got a playlist called Motorcycle Tips for New Riders, which is designed to explain motorcycles in the UK to anyone from having no experience on bikes at all and knowing nothing to people who know a bit but just want a bit more information. Basically, there is videos there to take you from nothing to whatever bike you want and have it all explained simply along the way, and they are very successful and people think I'm quite good at it, which is nice. But there is a gap, and that is to talk about restricted A2 motorcycles. People say, should I get a restricted bike or one that just happens to fit within the A2 restrictions naturally? Like this Honda CBR 500R, which is my other half that I've borrowed for this video. But this is a good example of a bike which gets right up to the maximum of what you can have on an A2 without having any restriction on it. I have a video that explains the licenses and what you can have at what age, so you can know about the A2 license that way. And also I have a video talking about, is the A2 license enough, to use on the UK roads? So those videos already exist. So as I say, the A2 is a restricted license for people to take from the age of 19. This allows you, basically, after you've had the A2 for 2 years, you can take the full A license that allows you to ride anything. And obviously if you take it at 19, 2 years after that, you can do it at the age of 21. Normally, you'd have to wait till you're 24 before you can take the full test straight off to get onto any bike that you want. So you're restricted to 35 kilowatts of power, but you're also restricted on power to weight, which is that the bike isn't allowed to have more than 0.2 kilowatts per kilo of its curb weight, its overall weight. That means that some bikes which are less powerful than 35 kilowatts, but because of their lightness, you cannot have. And another side to it is that if the bike from stock had more than 94 brake horsepower, you can never restrict it on an A2. Depending on what bike it is, it will be restricted in a different way. There's generally 4 methods. There's the throttle stop, which just stops you opening full throttle and getting all of the power of the bike, so it keeps it under that 35 watt limit. You can have intake reducers, which basically stop so much air getting into the exhaust. You can have exhaust reducers, which stop so much air getting out of the exhaust, which obviously is going to take some power away from it. And you also get ECU, or the brain of the computer. You can basically reflash that or put it into its restricted mode. Things like the Suzuki SV650 are like that you can just plug in a new box and basically it's restricted or non-restricted based on what's plugged into it. Some insurance companies require you, to my understanding, to supply a piece of paper that is from a garage that says, yes, the throttle restrictor has been applied to this bike. And other ones will just be happy with the piece of paper that comes with the throttle restrictor kit without it being approved or checked, because you might fit it yourself because they're not particularly difficult. This bike, which is my Yamaha X-Trail 6 Diversion, is an example of a bike which would need to be restricted to ride on an A2 and can be restricted to ride on an A2. This one's not restricted, obviously, because I have a full A license, so I don't need to do that. So let's go for a little ride, and I'm going to cover the 3 scenarios that come to my mind as to whether you should get restricted, non-restricted, what's the best thing to do. Now, as I say, this is just my opinion, but I can see it from 3 perspectives. 1, if you're planning to keep the A2 for a long time, I would say get a bike which is naturally A2 compliant, like the CBR, because you're never going to have that feeling that you're riding this bike and not getting to use it to its full potential, which can lead people to being tempted to remove restrictors and stuff before they get the license, which just isn't a very good idea. So as I say, something like the CBR is good because you get to actually use all the bike for everything that it is. However, if you're planning on keeping the bike for a long time, but actually going to do your full A, then having a restricted bike is actually quite a nice thing to do, because you get a little reward for passing your license. If you have an A2 bike, even though you may be happy with it, when you pass your full test, you don't get any reward for that. You just get to ride the same bike again. If you have a restrictor on it, you get to remove that restrictor and you get a little bit more that will maybe help tide you over until the point that you get the bike that you want, or you stay with that bike. The 3rd scenario is that your end goal is something like 1000cc or something that can never be restricted and then unrestricted. In this case, I don't think it really matters, and I probably would again lean towards get a bike which is naturally A2 compliant, sell it on and get the bike that you want when you pass your test, assuming, as I say, you are planning to buy that bike as soon as you pass your test. If you're waiting a while, then again, the restricted thing is a good idea, because you get a little bit of time to learn something with a bit more power than what you've been used to before you buy this much more powerful bike. Maybe you're going for 1000cc or something like that, just to give an extreme example. I think that is about as much as I can say, because beyond that, a lot of it is opinion and personal preference as to what you want. But, you know, logical thinking wise, from my perspective, if you're staying on the A2, you're probably not going to want a bike that you know, that's restricted and you can never use it all, when you can have a bike which is still compliant, still right at the same sort of power output, but naturally you can use the bike properly, fully experience it for everything that it is. If there's any aspects to this that you don't feel like I've covered, please comment them below, because as I say, I went from CBT for 7 years to a full A license, and even though the first bike that I bought, which was a DRZ 400 SM, was A2 compliant basically, a lot of people did question that. Like, why would you go for a full license and then get an A2 bike basically? Well, because I like small engine bikes, and the goal is not necessarily to always have as much power as you possibly can, because that's who I am. I then regretted that decision because that bike was not amazing at doing motorway stuff, and that's why I have this XJ6, which is good at that. But this bike only has 78 brake horsepower naturally, so it's something you can actually restrict for the A2. It's not, you know, so powerful that it never could. I don't feel like I need any more than this, because I really enjoy this sort of size engine, this sort of performance, where I actually get to use the engine and still go quite quickly and still be able to sit on a motorway comfortably. Unlike the DR, which just isn't designed to do that. Yeah, be my blocker. So there you go. It's a very simple one, and it may not help you, but hopefully it does, because as I say, those 3 scenarios are the surefire scenarios, I think. I can't think of any other way that you would get the license and then do or don't get the license, if you see what I'm saying. As I say, we're already well into the realms of mostly my opinions, so I don't think there's a lot more I can add. I think that pretty much covers most of the scenarios that people are going to be going through when it comes to getting a bike, and then their progression and whether they should or shouldn't get a restricted bike. But as I say, if there's any areas to this, any aspects or thought processes that I have missed that you went through when you were doing this, please comment below. But if you found this useful, please hit that like button, subscribe if you are new here. I'm on my way to 100k, and I'd really appreciate the help. In fact, we're on the last 10,000 countdown, and it's going quite quickly at the moment, so please do keep that momentum going and hit that subscribe button. And if you really want to help support this channel, please consider joining my Patreon for many benefits, including access to the Discord. You get videos early and all sorts of stuff like that. Anyway, until the next one, bye bye.